The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Sarah Mitchell stepped off the military transport plane in Afghanistan. The dry desert air hit her face like a wall of heat, carrying dust that settled on everything within seconds. She adjusted the weight of her medical pack on her shoulders and followed the line of soldiers toward the base camp. At 24 years old, she had trained for this moment for 3 years. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of what lay ahead. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Montana, where her father ran a veterinary clinic. From the age of 10, she would help him care for injured animals, learning the delicate balance between compassion and the tough decisions that sometimes had to be made. Her hands were steady even then, stitching up farm dogs and calming frightened horses with a gentle voice. When she turned 18, instead of following her father's footsteps into veterinary school, she chose a different path. The military needed medics, and she felt called to serve people who put their lives on the line every day. Basic training had been brutal. The physical demands pushed her body to limits she never knew existed. Running with full gear in the scorching heat, crawling through mud under barbed wire, and enduring sleepless nights became her new normal. But the medical training was where she truly excelled. Her instructors noticed something special about her. While other trainees panicked during high-pressure simulations, Sarah remained calm. Her hands never shook when applying tourniquets to mannequins spouting fake blood. Her voice stayed level when calling out vital signs during chaos. The base camp buzzed with activity as she arrived. Soldiers moved with purpose between buildings. Vehicles rumbled past carrying supplies, and the distant sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Sarah reported to the medical tent where she met Captain James Rodriguez, the senior medical officer. He was a veteran with 15 years of service, his face weathered by sun and experience. He looked at her personnel file briefly before meeting her eyes. "You come highly recommended, Mitchell," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "But recommendations don't mean much out here. You'll see things that no training can prepare you for. The question is whether you can handle it when the wounded start coming in." Sarah stood straight, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm ready, sir. I didn't come here to fall apart." Captain Rodriguez almost smiled. "We'll see. Get yourself settled. Your first shift starts at 0600 tomorrow." The medical tent became her world for the next several months. It was a place of controlled chaos where life and death decisions happened in split seconds. The wounded came in waves, sometimes after firefights, sometimes after roadside bombs turned vehicles into twisted metal. Sarah learned quickly that her training had only scratched the surface of what combat medicine really meant. Her first real test came on a Tuesday morning. A convoy had been hit by an improvised explosive device 5 miles from base. The call came over the radio, and everyone in the medical tent snapped into action. Sarah's heart pounded as she prepared the surgical area, laying out instruments with shaking hands. When the first casualties arrived, the tent filled with the smell of blood and burnt flesh. 3 soldiers were carried in on stretchers. One had shrapnel wounds across his chest and legs. Another had lost part of his right arm in the blast. The third wasn't moving at all. Sarah was assigned to the soldier with the chest wounds. His name was Private Danny Chen, and he was barely 19 years old. His eyes were wide with shock and pain as Sarah cut away his uniform to assess the damage. "You're going to be okay," she told him, forcing her voice to stay calm even as her hands worked frantically to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, Danny. Keep your eyes open and keep talking to me." "It hurts," he gasped, his young face contorted in agony. "God, it hurts so much." "I know it does," Sarah said, inserting an IV line with practiced precision. "But you're tough. You're going to get through this." For the next 40 minutes, Sarah worked alongside Captain Rodriguez and 2 other medics. They extracted shrapnel, stopped internal bleeding, and stabilized all 3 soldiers enough to evacuate them to a larger medical facility. When the helicopter finally lifted off carrying the wounded, Sarah stepped outside the tent and threw up behind a supply container. Captain Rodriguez found her there, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. He didn't say anything about it, just handed her a bottle of water. "You did good work in there, Mitchell. Chen is alive because you kept your head." Sarah took a long drink of water, her hands still trembling slightly. "Does it get easier?" "No," Rodriguez said honestly. "You just get better at handling it. The day it gets easy is the day you should quit." The weeks turned into months, and Sarah proved herself again and again. She treated gunshot wounds and burn victims, performed emergency surgeries in the back of moving vehicles. and talked dying soldiers through their final moments when there was nothing else she could do. Each case left a mark on her, a weight she carried that grew heavier with time. But something else was happening too. Sarah began to notice patterns in how the wounded arrived. Certain areas were more dangerous than others. Certain tactics used by the enemy were more effective. She started studying maps in her free time, marking where casualties came from, trying to understand the bigger picture beyond just treating the results. One evening, she sat in the mess hall with a group of Navy SEALs who were stationed at the base between missions. They were a tight unit, speaking in their own shorthand, sharing stories with dark humor that civilians would never understand. Sarah listened quietly as they discussed an upcoming operation. They needed to clear a compound where intelligence suggested a high-value target was hiding. "The problem is the approach," one of them said, pointing at a satellite image on his tablet. "There's no cover for the last 100 yards. We'll be completely exposed." Sarah looked at the image, then at the surrounding terrain she recognized from casualty reports. "That ridge," she said, pointing to a feature on the map. "3 weeks ago, we treated 2 Marines who got hit from that position. Someone was up there with a long-range rifle." The SEALs looked at her with new interest. Lieutenant Marcus Stone, the team leader, leaned forward. "You keep track of that kind of thing?" "I started to," Sarah admitted. "Helps me understand what I'm dealing with when patients come in." Stone exchanged glances with his team. "That's good intel, Doc, real good." That conversation planted a seed that would change everything about Sarah's future, though she didn't know it yet. For now, she returned to her bunk that night, wrote a brief email home to her father, and tried to sleep despite the sounds of distant explosions that had become so familiar. They were almost comforting in their predictability. The relationship between Sarah and the SEAL team developed naturally over the following weeks. They started seeking her out during planning sessions, asking about injury patterns and enemy tactics she had observed through her medical work. Sarah found herself fascinated by their world. These men operated differently from regular infantry units. They moved with absolute precision, spoke with economy, and carried themselves with a quiet confidence that came from being the best at what they did. Lieutenant Marcus Stone was particularly interested in Sarah's observations. He was 32, a career military man who had joined the Navy at 18 and worked his way up through sheer determination and skill. Unlike some officers who kept distance from their subordinates, Stone treated his team like brothers. He also recognized talent when he saw it, regardless of where it came from. "You've got a tactical mind, Doc," he told Sarah one afternoon as they reviewed her notes about casualty patterns. "Most medics just treat what comes in. You're trying to prevent it." Sarah felt a flush of pride at the compliment. "I just hate seeing the same injuries from the same locations over and over. If we know where the threats are, shouldn't we be doing something about it?" "We are," Stone said. "But intelligence is always incomplete. What you're tracking fills in gaps that satellite images and informants can't always provide." That evening, Stone made an unusual request. "How are you with a rifle, Mitchell?" Sarah blinked in surprise. "I qualified expert in basic training, but I haven't done much since then." "Why?" "Come to the range tomorrow at 1500 hours. I want to see something." The shooting range was set up on the edge of the base with targets at various distances. When Sarah arrived, she found Stone waiting with several weapons laid out on a table. He handed her an M4 carbine, the standard rifle she had trained with. "Show me what you've got," he said simply. Sarah checked the weapon automatically, her training taking over. She took position, controlled her breathing, and fired at the targets downrange. Her shots were good, clustering tightly around the center mass at close and medium distances. Stone watched without comment, then handed her a different rifle. This one was heavier, with a powerful scope mounted on top. "This is an M110 semi-automatic sniper system," Stone explained. "Effective range of about 800 meters. Try the targets at 300 first." Sarah settled into a prone position, adjusting the rifle against her shoulder. The scope brought the distant target into sharp clarity. She remembered what her father taught her about patience when treating nervous animals. "Don't rush, breathe. Find the moment of stillness." She squeezed the trigger gently and the rifle kicked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the round punch through the target slightly left of center. "Adjust for wind," Stone suggested. "You felt that breeze, right?" Sarah made the correction and fired again. This time the shot hit dead center. She fired 5 more rounds, each one finding its mark with increasing precision. When she stood up, Stone was nodding slowly. "I thought so," he said. You've got steady hands and good spatial awareness, both critical for long-range work. What are you thinking, sir? Sarah asked, curious about where this was leading. Stone holstered his sidearm and looked at her seriously. I'm thinking that a medic who can also provide overwatch would be invaluable on certain operations. Someone who understands ballistics and anatomy, who can protect the team from distance and treat them if things go wrong. Sarah's heart started beating faster. You want me to train as a sniper? I want you to train with us at least. See if you have the aptitude for it. The final decision would be yours, of course. You're a hell of a medic and we need those too. But talent like yours shouldn't be limited if you're willing to develop it. The proposition was extraordinary. Female snipers existed in the military, but they were rare, especially in combat zones. Sarah had never considered herself as anything other than a medic, but something about the idea resonated with her. She thought about all the soldiers she had treated, all the preventable injuries if threats could be neutralized before they struck. When do we start? She asked. Training began the next morning at 0500. Stone pushed her harder than any instructor in basic training ever had. Running with full combat load, practicing shooting positions for hours until her muscles screamed, learning to read wind and calculate ballistic trajectories. The other SEALs in the unit watched with skepticism at first. A medic trying to run with their elite group seemed like a recipe for disaster, but Sarah surprised them. Her medical training had given her deep understanding of human physiology and how to push past perceived limits. Her years helping her father with animals had taught her infinite patience and steady nerves. And something else drove her forward, something she barely understood herself. Every time she wanted to quit, she thought about Private Danny Chen's face twisted in pain, about all the young soldiers she had watched suffer and die. Sergeant Mike Hawk Hawkins was assigned as her primary instructor for marksmanship. He was a legendary shooter within the SEAL community, with confirmed kills from over 1,000 meters. Hawk was initially resistant to training a medic, but he respected Stone's judgment enough to give Sarah a fair chance. Shooting is 10% mechanics and 90% mental, Hawk told her during their first session. Any fool can point a rifle and pull a trigger. A real sniper controls everything, breathing, heartbeat, even their thoughts. You think you can handle that, Doc? Teach me, Sarah said simply. Hawk put her through drills that seemed impossible, holding shooting positions for 30 minutes without moving, estimating ranges by eye alone, calculating holdovers for wind and elevation in her head, reading terrain to find concealment, moving through open ground without being seen. Each task was designed to break her down and rebuild her as something different. The physical demands were brutal, but the mental challenges were worse. Hawk would create scenarios where she had to make split-second decisions, identify which target posed the greatest threat, determine if a shot was worth taking or if holding fire was smarter, except that sometimes there were no good options, only less terrible ones. One afternoon, 3 weeks into her training, Hawk set up a complex scenario. Multiple targets at different ranges, civilian mannequins mixed in with combatant targets, wind gusting unpredictably. Sarah had to engage the threats in the right order without hitting civilians, all while Hawk shouted distractions in her ear and threw rocks near her position to simulate incoming fire. Sarah blocked it all out. She found that quiet place inside herself where only the rifle existed, where mathematics and instinct merged. First target, 400 meters, slight wind from left. Adjust 2 clicks, breathe, fire, hit. Second target, closer but moving, lead the target. Compensate for movement, fire, hit. Third target, partially obscured. Wait for clear shot, patience, fire, hit. When she finished, Hawk was silent for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. You've got it, Mitchell. That thing that can't be taught. You've actually got it. The validation from Hawk changed how the other SEALs viewed her. They started including her in tactical discussions, asking her opinions on approach strategies. She continued her medical duties, but now she trained with the team during every spare moment. Captain Rodriguez noticed the change in her and called her into his office. You're spending a lot of time with the SEAL team, he observed, his tone neutral, but his eyes curious. Sarah stood at attention. Yes, sir. They've been teaching me advanced combat skills. I believe it makes me a more effective medic. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. And if they asked you to go on a mission with them? To do more than just provide medical support? I would consider it an honor, sir, Sarah said honestly. The captain studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Just remember what you came here to do, Mitchell. Saving lives, not taking them. I haven't forgotten, sir. But sometimes saving lives means stopping the people trying to end them. Rodriguez dismissed her, but his words stayed with Sarah. She lay awake that night in her bunk, thinking about the line she was approaching. She had joined the military to heal, to help. Now she was training to kill. Were those things truly compatible? Or was she betraying the oath she had taken as a medic? The answer came 2 days later when a massive firefight erupted 3 kilometers from base. Multiple casualties were reported, and the medical team scrambled to prepare. But this time was different. The enemy had the high ground and was pinning down the wounded, making evacuation impossible. Medics who tried to reach the injured were being shot. Sarah listened to the desperate radio calls and made a decision that would change everything. Sarah grabbed her medical pack and ran toward the armory. Lieutenant Stone was already there, gearing up with his team for a rescue operation. He looked surprised when Sarah burst through the door, but she spoke before he could question her presence. "I'm coming with you. Those wounded soldiers need a medic, and I can help suppress the shooters while you extract them." Stone evaluated her with hard eyes. This wasn't training anymore. This was real combat with real bullets and real consequences. "You sure about this, Mitchell? Once you cross this line, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Give me a rifle." The ride to the firefight location was tense. Sarah sat in the armored vehicle, checking and rechecking her equipment. Medical supplies, ammunition, rifle, sidearm. Everything had to be perfect. Hawk sat across from her, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke quietly. "First time is always the hardest, Doc, but remember your training. Control what you can control. Everything else is just noise." The vehicle stopped about 400 meters from the firefight. Through the dust and smoke, Sarah could see the disabled convoy and scattered soldiers taking cover behind vehicles. Muzzle flashes from a ridge above showed where the enemy fighters were positioned. Radio chatter indicated at least 4 wounded who couldn't be moved without covering fire. Stone quickly assessed the situation and laid out the plan. His team would approach from 2 directions to draw fire and provide suppression. Sarah would take a position on a small rise with clear sight lines to the ridge and provide overwatch. Once the shooters were neutralized or suppressed enough, medics would rush in to evacuate the wounded. "You don't have to take a kill shot if you can't," Stone told Sarah. "Just keep them pinned down so they can't shoot at our guys." Sarah nodded and moved to her position. Staying low and using terrain for cover, she found a spot behind a cluster of rocks that gave her a stable shooting platform and clear view of the ridge. Through her scope, she could see movement among the rocks where the enemy fighters were positioned. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hands remained steady as she settled the rifle and began to control her breathing. The SEAL team engaged first, their coordinated fire forcing the enemy to shift positions. Sarah tracked movement through her scope, calling out positions over the radio. Then she saw it. A fighter was repositioning to get a better angle on the pinned-down soldiers. He was carrying a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. If he fired that into the disabled vehicles, the wounded wouldn't stand a chance. Everything Hawk had taught her crystallized in that moment. Range estimation, wind calculation, breathing control. Sarah's world narrowed to the crosshairs in her scope. She thought about Private Danny Chen's terrified face, about all the soldiers she had treated who would never fully recover. She thought about the medics being shot while trying to help the wounded. The fighter with the RPG stopped moving, settling into position to fire. Sarah's finger moved to the trigger. Breathe in, breathe out, hold. The moment between heartbeats when everything is still. Squeeze. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the fighter drop. The RPG fell from his hands, unfired. For a moment, Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She had just killed another human being. "Good shot, Mitchell." Stone's voice came over the radio, bringing her back. "Keep scanning." They're moving. Training took over. Sarah pushed aside the emotional shock and focused on the task. She identified targets, called positions, took shots that forced enemy fighters to keep their heads down. The SEAL team advanced methodically, their professional precision overwhelming the enemy fighters' chaotic resistance. Within 15 minutes, the shooting stopped. The enemy fighters either fled or were neutralized. Medical teams rushed forward to treat the wounded. Sarah slung her rifle and grabbed her medical pack, running toward the casualties despite her shaking legs. 3 soldiers needed immediate attention. One had a sucking chest wound, another had severe bleeding from a leg injury, and the third had taken shrapnel to the abdomen. Sarah's training as a medic overwhelmed everything else. Her hands moved automatically, stopping bleeding, establishing airways, starting IVs. She talked constantly, keeping the wounded soldiers focused on her voice rather than their pain. "You're going home," she told Corporal James Martinez as she worked on his chest wound. "This looks bad, but I've seen worse. You're going to make it." Martinez coughed blood but managed a weak smile. "You're the medic who was shooting, right? I saw you drop that guy with the RPG. You saved us." Sarah didn't respond, focused entirely on keeping him alive until the evacuation helicopter arrived. But his words stuck with her. She had killed someone. She had also saved people. Those two facts existed together now. Impossible to separate. The helicopter arrived and took the wounded to a larger medical facility. All three survived, though Martinez would spend months in recovery. Sarah rode back to base in the same armored vehicle, silent among the SEALs who were reviewing the action with their typical matter-of-fact analysis. Back at base, Captain Rodriguez was waiting. His expression was complicated as Sarah approached, still wearing gear covered in blood and dust. He guided her away from the others, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "I heard what happened out there," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" Sarah thought about lying, about saying she was fine. But Rodriguez deserved honesty. "I don't know, sir. I killed someone today, but I also saved people. I can't process both of those things at the same time." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's normal. Healthy even. The day you stop feeling conflicted about taking a life is the day you've lost something important. But you need to understand something, Mitchell. What you did today was necessary. That fighter with the RPG would have killed everyone in that convoy." "I know that intellectually," Sarah said, "but knowing something and feeling it are different." "They are," Rodriguez agreed. "Take tonight. Process this. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." Sarah returned to her quarters, showered off the blood and dust, and lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep seemed impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fighter in her scope, saw the moment he fell. She also saw Corporal Martinez's face, heard him say, "You saved us." Around midnight, there was a quiet knock on her door. Hawk stood outside holding 2 cups of coffee. Without asking permission, he came in and handed her one. They sat in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "First kill is different for everyone," Hawk said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Some people feel nothing. Some people fall apart. Most people feel somewhere in between, confused about what they're supposed to feel." "How did you feel?" Sarah asked. "Your first time?" Hawk was quiet for a long moment. "Sick, guilty, relieved, proud, ashamed, all at once. I was 22, fresh out of training. Thought I was ready for anything. Turns out pulling a trigger in practice is nothing like pulling it when there's a real person on the other end." "Does it get easier?" "No," Hawk said honestly. "You just get better at carrying it. And you hold on to the reason why you did it. That fighter today, he made his choice when he picked up that weapon and aimed it at our people. You made your choice to protect them. Both choices have consequences, but yours saved lives." Sarah sipped her coffee, thinking about his words. Captain Rodriguez said something similar. "Rodriguez is a good man. Smart too. He knows you're at a crossroads, Mitchell. You could go back to being just a medic. Nobody would blame you. What you did today was above and beyond. Or you could keep developing this other skill. Become something rare and valuable. Someone who can save lives with medical knowledge and protect lives with tactical skills. What would you do?" Sarah asked. Hawk smiled slightly. "I can't answer that for you, Doc. But I will say this, you've got a gift. I've trained a lot of shooters, and most of them never developed the kind of natural ability you showed today. You stayed calm under pressure, made the right calls, and executed perfectly. That's not something that can be taught." After Hawk left, Sarah finally fell into an exhausted sleep. She dreamed of the Montana mountains where she grew up, of helping her father save a horse that had broken its leg. In the dream, her father asked her why she became a medic instead of a veterinarian. She told him it was because people needed help too. He smiled and said, "Helping comes in many forms, Sarah. Sometimes the kindest thing is to heal. Sometimes it's to protect. Sometimes it's both." She woke up knowing what her decision would be. The next morning, she found Lieutenant Stone during breakfast and pulled him aside. "I want to continue training with your team. I want to be ready the next time you need me." Stone studied her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. Finding none, he nodded. Then we do this right. Official channels, proper training, full integration. You'll be the first combat medic in this theater to also serve as a designated marksman. It's going to be hard, Mitchell. Harder than anything you've done so far. I understand, Sarah said firmly. The formal training program began immediately. Lieutenant Stone pulled strings with higher command, presenting Sarah's unique skill set as a force multiplier. A medic who could provide both emergency medical care and precision fire support was valuable enough that the bureaucracy moved faster than usual. Within a week, Sarah had official orders to undergo advanced marksmanship training while maintaining her medical duties. The workload was punishing. Sarah woke at 0400 every morning for physical training with the SEAL team. They ran miles in full gear, practiced combat drills, and worked on team coordination. After morning PT, she reported to the medical tent for her regular shift, treating everything from minor injuries to serious combat wounds. In the afternoons, Hawk put her through intensive shooting training, teaching her advanced techniques that most snipers took years to master. Sleep became a luxury Sarah could barely afford. She survived on 4 hours a night, fueled by coffee and pure determination. Her body adapted, becoming leaner and harder. Muscles she never knew existed developed from the constant physical demands. Her mind sharpened too, learning to switch instantly between the methodical calm of medical work and the predatory focus of a marksman. Other soldiers on base noticed the transformation. Some were supportive, impressed by her dedication. Others were skeptical or outright hostile. A female medic training to kill went against their traditional understanding of both roles. Sarah ignored the whispers and stayed focused on her goals. 6 weeks into the new training regimen, Lieutenant Stone called Sarah into a briefing room. The rest of his SEAL team was already there, along with several intelligence officers. Maps and satellite images covered the walls, showing terrain that Sarah recognized from casualty reports. "We've got a mission," Stone said without preamble. "High-value target. Compound in a remote valley about 30 kilometers northwest. Intelligence indicates he's coordinating attacks against our supply routes. We're going in tomorrow night to capture or eliminate him." One of the intelligence officers, a captain named Wells, pointed to the satellite imagery. The compound sits in a natural bowl surrounded by higher ground. Only one good approach, which makes it defendable, but also means we can establish overwatch positions with clear sight lines. Stone looked at Sarah. "I want you on overwatch, Mitchell. You'll position on this ridge here, approximately 600 meters from the compound. Your job is to protect the team during approach and extraction, neutralize any threats that emerge during the assault, and provide medical support if anyone goes down." Sarah studied the terrain carefully, her tactical training merging with her medical knowledge. "What's the composition of the target's security? How many fighters? What kind of weapons?" "Intel suggests 8 to 12 fighters, mix of small arms and possibly a machine gun position here." Wells indicated a spot on the map. "They've been careful, rotating security patterns, which is why we need to hit them at night." The briefing continued for 2 hours, covering every aspect of the operation. Insertion method, communication protocols, fallback positions, medical evacuation procedures. Sarah absorbed it all, asking questions when necessary, making notes about likely injury scenarios and how she would respond. After the briefing ended, Hawk pulled Sarah aside. "You ready for this, Doc? This is different from that firefight. This is deliberate, planned. You'll have time to think about what you're doing before you do it." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "I've thought about it every day since that firefight. I know what this means. I'm ready." That night, Sarah wrote an email to her father. She couldn't tell him about the mission, but she wanted him to know she was okay. She told him about the mountains here, how different they were from Montana but beautiful in their own harsh way. She told him she was doing important work that saved lives. She didn't mention the other part, the taking of lives. Some things were better left unsaid. The team inserted by helicopter at 2200 hours, landing 2 kilometers from the target compound. The night was dark, clouds covering the moon, which was perfect for their purposes. Sarah carried both her medical pack and her rifle, plus ammunition and equipment that brought her total load to nearly 80 pounds. The weight would have crushed her 6 months ago. Now she moved with practiced efficiency, keeping pace with the SEALs as they navigated the rough terrain. It took 90 minutes to reach the overwatch position, Sarah established herself among a cluster of rocks that provided both cover and a clear field of fire. Through her night vision scope, she could see the compound below, lights visible in several windows. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures moving inside and 2 guards outside, one near the main gate, another on a rooftop. "Overwatch in position," Sarah reported quietly over the radio. "I have visual on 2 sentries, one at the gate, one on the northeast corner of the main building." "Copy that," Stone responded. "Stand by." The SEAL team moved into position, approaching from multiple angles with ghost-like silence. Sarah tracked their progress through her scope, simultaneously monitoring the compound for any signs of alert. Her breathing was calm, heart rate steady. All the training had built muscle memory so complete that her body knew what to do without conscious thought. At 23:45, Stone gave the order. "Execute! Everything happened fast!" The SEAL team breached the compound from 2 points simultaneously. Flashbang grenades lit up the night, followed by the controlled bursts of suppressed gunfire. Sarah's scope swept the compound systematically, looking for threats to the team. Movement on the rooftop. A fighter appeared carrying an AK-47, raising it toward where 2 SEALs were advancing. Sarah's crosshairs found him instantly. Range 620 meters. Slight wind from the right. Minimal elevation difference. The calculation was automatic. She fired, and the fighter dropped before he could squeeze his trigger. Another threat. This one emerging from a doorway with an RPG. Sarah's second shot took him down, the RPG clattering harmlessly to the ground. The assault continued, methodical and precise. Sarah provided 3 more shots, each one eliminating a threat before it could endanger the team. Then something went wrong. An explosion rocked the compound, much larger than the flashbangs. Someone had triggered an IED, and the radio erupted with urgent calls. "Man down! We need the doc now!" Sarah's priorities shifted instantly. She safed her rifle and grabbed her medical pack, moving down from the overwatch position at a speed that would have seemed reckless to anyone who hadn't trained as intensively as she had. She covered the distance to the compound in under 4 minutes, arriving to find Sergeant Tom Ryder Ridgway on the ground, severe bleeding from his left leg. The tactical situation was still active. Gunfire echoed from inside the compound as the team secured the target. Sarah worked on Ridgway in the middle of potential danger, but her focus was absolute. Tourniquet above the wound, pressure dressing, IV access, pain management. Her hands moved with practiced precision while her mind calculated blood loss, shock risk, evacuation timeline. "You're going to be fine, Ryder," she told him, her voice carrying absolute confidence. "This is nasty but manageable. I've seen worse." Ridgway's face was pale with shock and pain, but he managed a weak grin. "You better not be lying, Doc. I've got a daughter's wedding to walk her down the aisle next year." "Then we'll make sure you're there," Sarah promised, stabilizing the wound enough for transport. The mission succeeded. The high-value target was captured, and the team extracted with no fatalities. Ridgway's injury was serious, but Sarah's immediate treatment saved his leg and possibly his life. During the helicopter ride back to base, he gripped her hand weakly and said, "You did both today, Doc. Saved me and saved the mission. Stone was right about you." The after-action report praised the mission's execution, particularly highlighting the effectiveness of having a medic with combat skills on the team. Sarah's shots had prevented casualties, and her medical intervention had saved Ridgway from permanent disability. Stone submitted a commendation for her performance, but Sarah was more focused on Ridgway's recovery than any official recognition. Word of the mission spread through the base. Sarah Mitchell, the medic who could shoot like a sniper and save lives like a surgeon, became something of a legend. Other units started requesting her presence on operations. Command took notice, seeing the potential value in cross-training more personnel in similar ways. But success brought its own challenges. Sarah found herself being pulled in multiple directions: medical duties, training obligations, mission preparations. The emotional toll of her dual role also weighed heavily. Each life she took stayed with her, even when rationally justified. Each life she saved came with the knowledge that she couldn't save everyone. One evening, about 3 months into her new role, Sarah sat alone on a quiet part of the base, watching the sun set over the mountains. Captain Rodriguez found her there, settling down next to her without asking permission. "You've been running yourself into the ground, Mitchell," Rodriguez said quietly. "I've watched you go from a dedicated medic to something nobody quite knows how to classify. You're effective, incredibly so. but I'm worried about what it's costing you." Sarah didn't respond immediately, watching the orange and purple sky darken. "I'm doing what needs to be done, sir. The team." The decision weighed on Sarah's mind over the following weeks. She continued her duties, going on 2 more missions with the SEAL team while treating casualties in the medical tent during her regular shifts. Each experience made the choice harder. Part of her wanted to stay in the field, where her skills made an immediate, tangible difference. Another part recognized that teaching others could create lasting impact far beyond what she could accomplish alone. During this time, Sarah received an email from her father. He had heard through official channels that she had been doing exceptional work, though he didn't know the specifics. His message was simple but powerful. He wrote about a conversation they had when she was 16, helping him treat a critically injured dog. She had asked if it bothered him that he could only help one animal at a time when so many needed care. He had told her that you do what you can with what you have. And sometimes the best thing you can do is teach others so the help multiplies. Sarah read that email 3 times, hearing her father's voice in the words. He was giving her permission to leave the field, to take the teaching position without even knowing that was her dilemma. The universe had a strange way of providing answers exactly when they were needed. Before making a final decision, Sarah requested a meeting with the SEAL team. They gathered in an empty briefing room one evening after dinner. Stone, Hawk, Ridgway, who had returned to light duty, and the other team members who had become like family over the past months. "I wanted to talk to you all before I made my decision about the transfer," Sarah began. "You've taught me everything I know about operating in combat. You trusted me when nobody else would have. I need to know what you honestly think I should do." The men exchanged glances, and Hawk spoke first. "Doc, you've saved my ass more times than I can count, both with medical work and covering fire. But Stone showed me the program they're building. If you can train even 10 medics to half your level, that's 10 teams that benefit. That's a lot of soldiers who come home because of what you taught their medics." Ridgway nodded in agreement. "My daughter gets her father at her wedding because of your skills. How many other daughters deserve that same chance? You could help make that possible." Stone leaned back in his chair. "Mitchell, we're operators. We think tactically. So let's look at this tactically. You staying here means one team has an exceptional medic marksman. You going means potentially dozens of teams get medics with advanced skills. From a pure number standpoint, the transfer multiplies your effectiveness." "But I'd miss this," Sarah admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I'd miss the team, the missions, feeling like I'm making a direct difference." "You'd be making a different kind of difference," Stone said gently. "Teaching is its own kind of mission. Harder in some ways because you don't get the immediate satisfaction of seeing the results, but more important in the long run." The team spent another hour sharing stories, remembering missions they had run together, laughing about near disasters, and celebrating successes. By the end, Sarah knew what her decision had to be. These men would continue their work with or without her, but the medics she could train, the lives they might save, that was opportunity too valuable to pass up. The next morning, Sarah submitted her acceptance of the transfer. She would complete her current deployment, which had another 6 weeks remaining, then return to the States to begin developing the training program. Captain Rodriguez approved it immediately, pride evident in his expression. "You're doing the right thing, Mitchell," he told her. "Your impact here has been extraordinary, but what you'll build back home could change how we approach combat medicine for years to come." Those final 6 weeks were bittersweet. Sarah continued her work with renewed focus, knowing each mission was precious because it would be her last in this role. She studied everything intensely, making mental notes about what techniques worked best, what scenarios required special training, what mental preparation was crucial. The SEAL team ran 4 more operations before Sarah's deployment ended. Each was successful, though one came terrifyingly close to disaster when they encountered unexpectedly heavy resistance during an extraction. Sarah's overwatch position came under direct fire, forcing her to relocate while still providing cover for the team. She sustained minor shrapnel wounds to her shoulder, but continued operating until everyone was safely extracted. Hawk insisted on checking her wounds personally after they returned to base. As he cleaned and bandaged the cuts, he shook his head. "You're supposed to be leaving the field to become an instructor, Doc. Stop trying to collect more scars." Sarah laughed, despite the pain. "Had to give you one more story to tell about me, didn't I?" The injury was minor enough that it didn't affect her departure timeline. As her last days in Afghanistan approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much she had changed since arriving 10 months ago. The young medic who had stepped off that transport plane felt like a different person. War had forged her into something harder, more capable, but she hoped not crueler. She had learned to take lives when necessary, but never at the cost of her fundamental commitment to preserving life. Her final mission with the team was a quiet operation, gathering intelligence from a remote village with minimal risk of engagement. It felt fitting somehow, ending not with dramatic combat but with the careful, methodical work that most military operations actually involved. As they rode back to base in the twilight, Sarah looked at the faces of the men around her, memorizing details she never wanted to forget. The last day came too quickly. Sarah packed her equipment, said goodbyes to the medical staff who had become colleagues and friends, and made a final visit to the shooting range where Hawk had first recognized her potential. She fired one last group of shots, placing them precisely at 600 meters, then safed the rifle and walked away. Lieutenant Stone organized an unofficial farewell gathering that evening. Someone had managed to acquire non-alcoholic beer, and the SEAL team presented Sarah with a custom patch they had designed. It showed a medical caduceus crossed with a sniper rifle, with the words "Guardian Angel" embroidered below. Sarah had to fight back tears as Hawk pinned it to her uniform. "You'll always be part of this team, Mitchell," Stone said, his usual professional demeanor cracking slightly. "What you've accomplished here will be remembered long after we're all gone. You've proven that roles don't have to limit capability, that we can be more than one thing if we're willing to work for it." Sarah looked around at these men who had pushed her, taught her, trusted her with their lives. "I wouldn't be who I am now without all of you. You took a chance on a medic who wanted to shoot, and you never made me feel like I had to choose between the two parts of myself. Thank you for that." The helicopter that would begin her journey home arrived at 0600 the next morning. Sarah boarded with one duffel bag, her medical pack, and memories that would last a lifetime. As the base grew smaller below her, she allowed herself one last look at the mountains that had become familiar. The terrain she could navigate in her sleep, the place where she had discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed. The flight to Germany, then to the United States, felt surreal. Each mile took her further from war and closer to a new kind of challenge. Sarah used the travel time to begin organizing her thoughts about curriculum development. What should be taught first? How to balance medical skills with tactical training? What mental preparation was most crucial? The questions were endless, but she approached them with the same methodical focus she brought to everything. Landing on American soil felt strange after months in a combat zone. The normal civilian world seemed too quiet, too safe, too disconnected from the reality she had been living. Sarah caught herself scanning rooftops and open spaces automatically, tactical awareness deeply ingrained. The training facility where she would be working was located in Virginia, a sprawling complex dedicated to special operations training. Sarah reported for duty 3 days after returning to the States. Still adjusting to the time difference and the absence of constant background threat, Colonel Marcus Webb, the officer overseeing the new program, met with Sarah the first day. He was in his 50s, a career Special Forces officer with combat experience across multiple theaters. His handshake was firm, his gaze evaluating. "Your record is impressive, Lieutenant Mitchell," Webb said, using her recent promotion that had come through during her last weeks in Afghanistan. "You've done things nobody thought possible, combining roles that were traditionally separate. Now the hard part begins. You have to figure out how to teach others to do the same thing." Sarah met his gaze confidently. "I'm ready, sir. I've spent the last 6 weeks documenting everything I learned, thinking about how to break it down into teachable components. It won't be easy, but I believe we can create a program that produces medics who are force multipliers for their units." Webb smiled slightly. "I hoped you'd say that. Your first class of candidates arrives in 2 weeks. 15 combat medics who volunteered for advanced training. They're already skilled at their primary jobs. Your mission is to push them beyond what they think they're capable of, just like you were pushed." 2 weeks felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. Sarah threw herself into preparation with. The 15 medics who arrived for training were diverse in age and experience, but they shared common traits. All were volunteers, all had combat experience, and all carried themselves with the quiet competence of people who had already proven themselves under pressure. Sarah recognized herself in their faces, seeing the same determination she had felt when Lieutenant Stone first invited her to the shooting range. She gathered them in a classroom on the first morning, studying each face as they settled into seats. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few had clearly researched her background and watched with respect. Sarah let the silence stretch for a moment before beginning. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. 10 months ago, I was a combat medic in Afghanistan with no advanced tactical training. Today, I'm here to teach you skills that didn't exist in any official program until now. This course will be the hardest thing most of you have ever done. You'll question why you volunteered. You'll doubt whether you can succeed. Some of you will fail, but those who make it through will become something unique and valuable. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm not going to lie to you about what this training means. You'll learn to take lives efficiently and save lives expertly. Those two things will exist together in your mind, and you'll have to find peace with that. If you can't, this isn't the program for you. There's no shame in being a traditional medic. But if you want to be more, if you want to protect your team in ways beyond medical care, then I'll teach you everything I know. A hand went up. Staff Sergeant David Park, 30 years old with 2 combat deployments. Ma'am, how do you reconcile it? The oath to do no harm versus learning to kill? Sarah appreciated the direct question. I don't reconcile it. I accept both. When I shoot, I'm protecting lives. When I treat wounds, I'm saving lives. Both actions serve the same ultimate purpose, keeping good people alive to go home to their families. The methods are different, but the intention is the same. The training began that afternoon. Sarah structured the program the way she had been taught, starting with physical conditioning that pushed everyone to their limits. They ran miles in full gear through Virginia woods, practiced shooting fundamentals until their hands cramped, and learned tactical movement under simulated fire. Sarah was relentless but fair, demanding excellence while recognizing individual efforts. 3 students washed out in the first week, unable to maintain the physical demands while keeping up with medical certification requirements. Sarah counseled each one privately, ensuring they understood that failure here didn't diminish their value as medics. They simply weren't suited for this specific, demanding hybrid role. The remaining 12 students adapted and grew stronger. Sarah taught them what Hawk had taught her about patience, about breathing control, about the mental discipline required for precision shooting. She taught them tactical analysis, how to read terrain and predict enemy movements. She taught them triage under fire, how to make split-second decisions about who could be saved and who was beyond help. But she also taught them the harder lessons, the ones that couldn't be found in any manual. She talked about the weight of taking a life even when justified. She shared her own struggles with the dual nature of their role. She brought in military psychologists to discuss combat stress and moral injury. Sarah wanted to produce not just effective operators, but healthy ones who understood themselves well enough to avoid the pitfalls that destroyed so many warriors. Midway through the 12-week course, Sarah designed a comprehensive field exercise. The students would conduct a simulated rescue mission in a mock village, complete with role players acting as wounded soldiers and enemy fighters. They would have to provide overwatch, assault the objective, treat casualties under fire, and successfully extract. Sarah would observe and evaluate, but not intervene unless someone's safety was genuinely at risk. The exercise revealed each student's capabilities and limitations. Some froze under pressure, their shooting skills evaporating when faced with realistic stress. Others excelled tactically but struggled with medical decision-making in chaotic environments. A few managed to balance both aspects effectively, moving fluidly between warrior and healer as situations demanded. One student in particular stood out. Corporal Jennifer Hayes, 26, with a background remarkably similar to Sarah's. She had grown up on a ranch, learned practical medicine helping injured livestock, and joined the military to serve something larger than herself. During the field exercise, Hayes took command when the designated leader went down with a simulated injury. She reorganized the team, established effective overwatch, and personally treated 3 casualties while coordinating extraction. Her performance was so impressive that Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what the program was meant to produce. After the exercise, Sarah pulled Hayes aside. You have real talent for this, Corporal. How are you handling the mental aspects? Hayes considered the question carefully. It's hard, ma'am. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing part of myself by learning to be aggressive, But then I remember why I'm doing this. If my skills can prevent my teammates from becoming casualties in the first place, that's worth the internal struggle. Sarah nodded, recognizing the same rationalization she had used. Just remember to check in with yourself regularly. Talk to the counselors when you need to. This job will change you, but you get to decide how. As the course progressed into its final weeks, Sarah received visitors. Lieutenant Stone and Sergeant Hawk flew in to observe the training and provide guest instruction. Their presence energized the students, who had heard stories about the legendary SEAL team that had first proven the hybrid medic marksman concept. Hawk spent 2 days teaching advanced shooting techniques, pushing the students to distances and difficulty levels they had never attempted. Stone conducted tactical briefings that challenged their strategic thinking. But the most powerful moment came when the two of them sat with the class and simply talked about real combat experiences, sharing the truth of what students would face if they deployed with these new skills. What Lieutenant Mitchell is teaching you will save lives, Stone told the gathered students. I've seen it firsthand. But it comes with a price. You'll carry weight that other people don't understand. The key is finding people you can talk to, whether that's teammates or counselors or family. Don't try to carry it alone. During their visit, Stone pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. You've built something remarkable here, Mitchell. These students are getting training that would have taken me years to develop in the field. You've systematized it, made it teachable. That's an achievement beyond what you did in Afghanistan. Sarah felt pride at his words, but also uncertainty. I just hope I'm preparing them properly. What if my methods don't work for everyone? What if I'm sending them into situations they're not ready for? You're doing what every good instructor does, worrying about your students, Stone said with a slight smile. But you can't control everything. You teach them the best you can. You give them the tools to succeed, and then you trust them to rise to the challenge. Some will exceed expectations. Some will struggle. That's not a reflection on your teaching. It's just the reality of human diversity. The final week of training culminated in a comprehensive evaluation. Each student faced a grueling 48-hour field exercise that tested everything they had learned. They navigated hostile territory, established overwatch positions, engaged targets at varying distances, treated simulated casualties with realistic injuries, and made ethical decisions under extreme pressure. Sarah and her fellow instructors observed without interfering, taking detailed notes on performance. When the exercise ended, all 12 remaining students had passed. Though with varying levels of proficiency, Sarah sat in her office reviewing evaluation reports, making notes about each student's strengths and areas for continued development. She felt exhausted but satisfied. These 12 medics were graduating with skills that could genuinely change how combat medicine was practiced. The graduation ceremony was simple but meaningful. Colonel Webb presented certificates and new qualification badges to each graduate. Sarah spoke briefly, offering final words of wisdom and encouragement. She looked at these medics who had trusted her to guide them and felt overwhelming responsibility for their futures. You are pioneers, she told them. You're the first class of what will become a new standard in combat medicine. People will watch how you perform, and their opinions will shape the future of this program. That's pressure, yes, but also opportunity. You have the chance to prove that we can be more than one thing, that expanding our capabilities makes us more effective at our core mission of saving lives. I'm proud of each of you, and I'll be watching your careers with great interest. After the ceremony, Corporal Hayes approached Sarah privately. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for everything you've taught us. But I also wanted to ask, do you ever regret the path you chose? Do you ever wish you had just stayed a traditional medic? Sarah thought about the question seriously before answering. I have moments of doubt, times when the weight feels too heavy. But regret? No, I've saved people I couldn't have saved otherwise, protected teammates who might have died without Overwatch. The cost has been